For more than 40 years, the public thought Elvis Presley passed away like many celebrities due to fame, excess, and drugs. However, it's not the whole tale. Dr. George Nichopoulos, Elvis Presley's longtime personal physician, is finally speaking up at the age of 100. Just the facts, no attorneys, no media fluff. He has held a secret ever since he witnessed Elvis's last hours, a fact that has the power to alter our perceptions of the king of rock and roll. What actually transpired on August 16, 1977, behind the doors of Graceland? What kept Dr. Nick from speaking up sooner? It's not a rumor. The true account of Elvis Presley's demise and how he might have been spared. The improbable bond. Dr. George Nichopoulos and Elvis Presley became friends because of a pressing medical necessity rather than because of their popularity or power. Elvis had an unexpected health problem at his Mississippi ranch in the late 1960s. Since there was no local doctor accessible, his team called in Dr. Nick, a respected Memphis-based doctor. Although it was intended to be a normal visit, something clicked as soon as Dr. Nick took over. Elvis took notice of his cool, collected demeanor, which contrasted sharply with the mayhem that frequently surrounding him. Elvis had been used to being treated like a celebrity. He was hence leery of most unfamiliar faces. However, Dr. Nick didn't show interest in him or skirt his position. He did not treat him as a legend, but as a human being. His genuineness made him stand out right away. Their initial meeting went much beyond a standard doctor's appointment and turned into an extensive discussion on Elvis's health, routine, and way of life. Trust, which Elvis never readily granted, particularly to anyone outside of his strictly regulated inner group, was sown by that openness. In reality, there was never any relationship between Elvis and that disastrous physician. It wasn't founded on commercialism, music, or celebrities. Dr. Nick appeared to be entirely different from Elvis, possibly representing the opposite of himself, and someone who didn't want to profit from his generosity but only wanted to help. The patient would occasionally seek advice from the latter for emotional balance when the diagnosis and treatment grew extremely complex. The doctor would also witness the high price Elvis paid for the strains he endured. Not to mention the emotional loneliness that comes with being a worldwide celebrity, there is the physical toll of performing live. The foundation of an enduring connection was laid by that one house call. Soon after, Elvis asked him to serve as his personal doctor. It would actually play roles outside of medicine. In addition to keeping an eye on Elvis's health and accompanying him on tours, Dr. Nick also looked after his family and employees. The position required a great deal of personal sacrifice and responsibility, but also had a lot of healthy moments. What began as an unexpected encounter evolved over time into one of Elvis Presley's most peculiar yet significant relationships. However, when celebrity fatigue and deteriorating health come together, even the strongest relationships can be put to the test, and the road was the clearest place to see that. Traveling life. Traveling with Elvis Presley was a blur of enthusiasm and fatigue. The public perception depicted stardom at its height. In crowded stadia, Elvis dazzles fans while wearing flashy jumpsuits and supported by a loud band. It appeared as though the rock and roll king thrived on the enthusiasm of the audience, as each performance looked effortless. However, the demanding lifestyle that underpinned this spectacle was rarely visible to fans. An tiring cycle was formed by the constant moving between cities, the long bus or plane rides, and the expectation to perform flawlessly every night. Elvis didn't have much time for relaxation or recuperation. Sleep was frequently a luxury rather than a necessary component of his day, and the instability had a detrimental effect. Maintaining good health was practically hard due to jet lag, erratic eating habits, and an unpredictable routine. Elvis's physique and spirit gradually began to deteriorate due to the stress of performing. Once an exciting aspect of his ascent to prominence, the road turned into a merciless machine that required more than it provided. Despite his passion for music and singing, he became more and more lonely due to the pressures of touring and turned to drugs as a coping mechanism. Keeping active and healthy away from the cameras is extremely tough for most people, especially celebrities. Dr. George Nichopoulos, well known as Dr. Nick, saw firsthand the toll that lifestyle caused on individuals. As Elvis Presley's personal doctor, he accompanied the singer on his tours and tried his best to oversee the artist's care as his health deteriorated. The best medical care was available, but it was insufficient to make up for the harm caused by the furious intensity. There was both physical and psychological exhaustion. In addition to this, Elvis experienced worry and sleeplessness, and he was burdened with the responsibility of promoting a legendary image. This ideal group of individuals closed in on Elvis from the most difficult aspects of being famous. The excursion started to leave noticeable and unworkable marks by the end of his life. It's possible that Elvis had started to exhibit signs of fatigue and confusion. The former dazzling theatrical presence is now starting to wane. Despite their intense emotional content, his performances frequently reflected his personal battles that developed into serious competitions. He now suffered from the way of living that earlier boasted of his wealth for tours. Ultimately, the same machine that greatly contributed to Elvis Presley's rise to fame turned out to be a tool for his health to deteriorate and ultimately lead to his untimely death. The terrible and untimely death of Elvis Presley occurred on the evening of August 16, 1977. Among the most important people in the history of music, his then-fiancée Ginger Alden discovered him unconscious in the bathtub of his Graceland house in Memphis, Tennessee. After unsuccessful attempts to resuscitate him, he was declared deceased at 3:30 p.m. at the Baptist Memorial Hospital. The world was horrified to learn of his passing, and both fans and musicians expressed their sorrow in spades. Elvis was only 42 years old when he passed away, and he was still playing, with a new tour set to start in a few days. Information about his death started to come to light in the hours and days that followed. Initially, a heart attack was listed as the official cause, but a toxicology investigation showed that he had significant quantities of prescription drugs in his system. Codeine, Valium, and morphine were among the compounds discovered, indicating that years of abusing dangerous prescription drugs had played a major role in his death. The large number and variety of prescriptions generated major questions about his health management and the participation of others around him, including his personal physician, Dr. George Nichopoulos, even though no illegal substances were found. As Elvis's condition deteriorated, those close to him and even the general public started to notice the aforementioned dramatic changes that ultimately led to his death. His initial sluggishness during performances and other public occasions was largely caused by weight gain, and he also had a number of health issues, such as glaucoma, liver impairment, and high blood pressure. Elvis nevertheless performed with an intolerable ferocity despite all of these warning signs. His early downfall was largely caused by an enhanced but ultimately self-destructive system that was formed for him by the pressures of his career, the need to please his admirers, and his dependence on mountains of prescription drugs. However, the significance of the night Elvis died goes far beyond the sadness of losing a musical legend. Instead, it would also serve as a wake-up call to the dubious side of celebrity. His passing sparked a broader discussion about the obligations of people who participate in the so-called circles of artists, and raised awareness of the issue of prescription drugs, specifically with regard to celebrities. Despite his passing, Elvis Presley continues to influence music and the public in comprehending the responsibilities of fame during his lifetime. The initial autopsy was performed on August 16, 1977. A few hours after his passing, Baptist Memorial Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee conducted the first autopsy on Elvis Presley. Dr. Jerry Francisco, the Shelby County medical examiner, conducted the autopsy at his family's request, accompanied by a group of pathologists. Officially, cardiac arrhythmia, an abnormal heartbeat most likely brought on by a heart attack, was declared as the instant cause of death. However, considering Elvis's advanced age and the acknowledged problems with his lifestyle and health, this conclusion left a lot of concerns unanswered. Medical professionals and the media viewed Dr. Francisco's assertion that drugs had no role in Elvis Presley's demise with suspicion. Given the lengthy list of prescription drugs that were ultimately discovered in his system, critics contended that this evaluation seems premature. The Presley family sealed the toxicology results in spite of the remark, which fueled public conjecture and theories regarding the true cause of his passing. A few months following the most recent post-mortem examination, the toxicology panel was established. It revealed that at least 14 different compounds, including potent sedatives, anxiety-reducing drugs, and painkillers, were in Elvis's body when he passed away. Extremely high quantities of some of the drugs were contained. Serious concerns
were also brought up regarding medically concealed information and the connection between the legacy and his doctor, Dr. George Nichopoulos, who subsequently faced an investigation for overprescribing drugs by the Tennessee Medical Board. Although he did not have any illicit narcotics in his system, the legal combination was extremely dangerous and probably caused the cardiac episode that ultimately led to Elvis's death. Above all, the first autopsy continues to be a significant part of Elvis Presley's legacy. It sparked conversations about the problem of healthcare for celebrities and the wealthy, misuse of prescription drugs, and medical ethics. The first autopsy revealed as much about Elvis's culture as it did about his physical state, even if the official cause of death is still unknown. The medications controversy after Elvis Presley passed away in 1977. Information regarding his long-term high pharmaceutical regimen came to light, sparking a growing controversy over his usage of drugs. Elvis was known to have a number of real medical issues, including high blood pressure, chronic pain, and insomnia, but the sheer number and range of drugs he was prescribed raised alarms. According to reports, he frequently used a variety of drugs, such as opiates, barbiturates, tranquilizers, sleeping pills, and stimulants. For almost 10 years, Dr. Nick had been writing prescriptions for Elvis and accompanying him on his tours to keep an eye on his health. Dr. Nichopoulos was indicted in 1980 on allegations that he had prescribed thousands of prescription drugs to Elvis and a number of other patients in the last months of his life.
In 1995, the Tennessee Board of Medical Examiners withdrew his medical license after finding him guilty of unprofessional conduct despite his acquittal on criminal charges. Prescription drug addiction was evident from the beginning and, in the most prominent way, became one of the cases of the well-known Elvis Presley case. According to many detractors, Elvis was a prisoner of a system that had always placed more importance on keeping him functioning than on addressing the underlying reasons of his health issues. Ultimately, this overprescription pathology became a warning story, and Elvis was the first of many in the decades that followed. The controversy surrounding the drugs not only changed the way that people talked about Elvis Presley's last days, but it also sparked more discussions about the morality of treating well-known patients in the medical community. It placed a strong emphasis on responsibility in the doctor-patient interaction with regard to a patient who possessed significant influence. The relationship between prescription drug abuse as a symptom and a cause of Elvis Presley's declining health was complex. Prescription drugs are a legacy of unfathomable genius and compassion for Elvis, but they also serve as a sobering reminder of the perils that can accompany notoriety and careless medical treatment. A significant turning point in the inquiry into the circumstances surrounding Elvis Presley's death was the trial of Dr. George Nichopoulos, the long-standing personal physician of the singer, in 1980. Elvis and a number of other patients, including entertainers Jerry Lee Lewis and others, were accused of receiving excessive prescriptions for controlled narcotics from Dr. Nichopoulos. According to the indictment, Dr. Nick administered Elvis more than 10,000 doses of different drugs between 1975 and 1977, many of which were stimulants, sedatives, and opioids. One of the first well-publicized attempts to hold a famous doctor responsible for careless prescribing practices was this case. The prosecution's evidence during the trial demonstrated that Dr. Nichopoulos had written prescriptions for an excessive number of drugs, frequently without adequate medical explanation. They contended that by continuing to provide drugs even after it became evident that Elvis was reliant on them, he had transgressed moral and legal boundaries. The defense, however, argued that Dr. Nick had taken action because he was concerned about Elvis's health and that he tried to control and taper the star's drug use to keep him from looking for even riskier options elsewhere. The defense also highlighted the pressure Elvis put on his doctor to provide him the drugs he insisted on. After all of that, the jury cleared Dr. Nichopoulos of all criminal charges after almost all of November 1980. Despite Dr. Nick's escape from prison, his reputation was badly damaged by his trial, and has raised awareness across the country about the dangers of overprescribing, particularly in cases involving the highest profiles. This 1980 court decision, in the opinion of many, did little to clear him of the acts that some believe caused Elvis Presley's untimely death. Dr. Nichopoulos's problems were far from done, despite the acquittals. After conducting an independent investigation into his practice, the Tennessee Board of Medical Examiners revoked his medical license in 1995 due to unethical activities involving excessive prescriptions. The trial and post-trial proceedings highlight the disparate approaches to patient care in the entertainment industry, where access to healthcare, wealth, and celebrity can occasionally collide in harmful ways. The 1980 trial is still regarded as a pivotal moment in the history of medical ethics and celebrity healthcare, as well as a crucial part of the larger indictment of Elvis Presley. However, the courtroom was not the last battlefield. The populace and media conducted their own independent inquiry into the king's true fate outside of the court system. A second autopsy and media backlash. After Elvis Presley passed away in 1977 and the preliminary autopsy results were released, the media hysteria around his death quickly grew more intense. Even though cardiac arrhythmia was stated as the official cause, many members of the public and press continued to have doubts, particularly after stories started to circulate regarding the extent of his use of prescription drugs. Journalists and fans alike began to wonder if the truth was being concealed when the Presley family decided to keep the entire autopsy report confidential for 50 years. Television specials and documentaries started breaking down Elvis Presley's last days in great detail, and tabloids ran dramatic headlines implying that drugs were more directly involved than the authorities acknowledged. Calls for a second investigation into the circumstances surrounding his death eventually arose as a result of the swelling public demand for answers, ongoing speculations, and increasing media pressure. Independent forensic specialists and journalists used the information at hand, particularly the toxicology studies that were eventually made public, to review the initial conclusions even though a formal second autopsy was never conducted in the conventional sense. According to these follow-up studies, polypharmacy, the risky mixing of several prescription drugs, was either directly or significantly responsible for Elvis Presley's death, rather than just heart disease. The most significant incident may have happened in 1994 when unidentified individuals approached Dr. Joseph Davis, a distinguished forensic pathologist and former Miami-Dade County medical examiner, to evaluate the medical evidence.
Dr. Davis determined that rather than being the result of pre-existing cardiac illness alone, death was most likely caused by an abrupt disruption of heart rhythm brought on by a hazardous interaction with drugs. This viewpoint supported the idea that a major contributing factor to Elvis Presley's untimely death was his extensive use of drugs, some of which had the effect of decreasing heart and respiratory function. The second autopsy played a significant part in the narrative surrounding Elvis Presley's passing, influencing how celebrity deaths are still thought about and reported today. It sparked discussions about the need for more openness in celebrity autopsy and brought the issue of excessive medication in the entertainment industry to the public's notice. The public's ongoing interest in Elvis Presley's last days serves as an example of the ongoing need for the complete revelation of the circumstances surrounding his passing. The combination of professional accounts and media skepticism has guaranteed that the mysteries surrounding Elvis Presley's death will continue to be a part of his complex legacy, even if no official second autopsy ruled out the first cause of death. One of the most unexpected and important medical findings after Elvis Presley's passing was the ailment known as megacolon, which was discovered during the initial autopsy. Chronic constipation and other gastrointestinal issues can result from megacolon, an aberrant dilatation of the colon that can obstruct regular bowel movements. According to reports, Elvis Presley's colon was more than 8 to 9 feet in length and 5 to 6 inches in diameter, which is almost double the size of a healthy colon. Given that this was a severe and advanced version of the ailment, it is likely that he had been dealing with it for a long time. Many of the chronic health issues that Elvis had experienced throughout his adult life, such as severe abdominal pain, bloating, and trouble sticking to a normal diet, were explained by the presence of megacolon. He suffered from severe chronic constipation, which further added to his misery, and perhaps to his need on prescription drugs to control his digestion and relieve pain. Given that Elvis was discovered on the floor of his bathroom, indicating that he may have passed out while trying to have a bowel movement, some experts speculate that the severe straining brought on by this illness may have contributed to the cardiac arrhythmia that ultimately caused his death. The fact that Elvis had, for all intents and purposes, lived his life up to that point without any indication of a serious diagnosis, while his illness was either undetected or not effectively treated, makes this discovery even more shocking. Even with the greatest of professionals in charge, his gastrointestinal problems were either misdiagnosed or managed symptomatically with drugs without ever being thoroughly worked up. This relates to his health in a much more general way. Numerous symptoms have been addressed separately, instead of falling under a general diagnostic. As a result, the potentially curable ailment known as megacolon A was neglected. Many people's perceptions of the circumstances surrounding Elvis's
deterioration were significantly altered by the discovery of his megacolon. It presented the notion that not all of the associated health issues were caused by substance abuse or lifestyle choices. They included a major, worsened medical problem that was mostly ignored. Undoubtedly, the problem was made worse by the usage of pharmaceutical drugs. However, the megacolon's very existence showed that Elvis battled a debilitating and little-known medical ailment in addition to the demands of fame and addiction. This revelation has become an emotional part in the story of Elvis Presley's final days and has brought attention to intestinal health for medical professionals. What might have prevented Elvis from dying? Many medical specialists and biographers have considered what interventions could have saved Elvis Presley's life in the years since his tragic death. Early and precise diagnosis of his underlying medical conditions, especially his persistent gastrointestinal disorder, which was subsequently determined to be megacolon, would have been one of the most obvious routes to a different outcome. His quality of life might have been much enhanced, and his reliance on prescription drugs to address associated pain and symptoms could have been decreased if this illness had been appropriately identified and treated throughout his lifetime. The severe discomfort that afflicted him for years may have been avoided with surgery, dietary adjustments, and specialist care. More competent medical oversight was another significant issue that could have changed Elvis's destiny. Enablers, including some members of his medical staff, surrounded Elvis throughout a large portion of his adult life and put his comfort ahead of establishing clear health boundaries. His personal doctor, Dr. George Nichopoulos, wrote thousands of prescriptions per year, frequently without regular supervision or communication with other medical professionals. The risk of deadly substance interactions may have been significantly lower if Elvis had been treated by a multidisciplinary medical team that prioritized long-term wellness, mental health assistance, and accountability in prescribing procedures. It's possible that Elvis Presley's lifestyle choices played a significant role in extending the length of his life. He had almost completely stopped exercising by the middle of the 1970s, was eating poorly, and was abusing drugs.
Perhaps he could have regained control over his body and mind with a structured program that included exercise courses, dietary interventions, and mental health counseling that addressed the various components of worry, stress, and discouragement associated to fame. In addition to his recovery from his prescription drug addiction, Elvis would have been able to manage his discomfort and mental upheaval if he had received treatment and counseling. In the end, he might have lived if he had received the right medical attention, made healthier lifestyle decisions, and had a life that was centered on his health rather than his public persona and performance schedule. Despite being tragic, his passing has brought attention to the necessity for comprehensive healthcare treatments for those in demanding professions. For the sake of life and the quality of that life, the narrative of Elvis Presley serves as a catalyst for the application of vigilant medical ethics, honesty and compassion, loyalty as well as miscommunication. In addition to his enormous cultural and artistic impact, Elvis Presley's legacy is influenced by the lingering misperceptions of the outside world and the steadfast allegiance of those who knew him. Elvis was more than just a performer to millions of admirers. He was a representation of charisma, passion, and defiance. His innovative blend of rock, country, blues, and gospel transformed American music and made a lasting impression on the world at large. Behind the scenes, however, Elvis was a complicated and frequently misinterpreted person. Throughout his life and long after his passing, Elvis's closest supporters, his family, friends, and employees, often referred to as the Memphis Mafia, remained steadfastly devoted to him. Although their loyalty was based on appreciation and sincere love, it also created a protective atmosphere that occasionally made his bad habits possible. Many of them made an effort to protect Elvis from the unpleasant facts or the public eye, but occasionally, that dedication came at a price, because it was more difficult for anyone to adequately address his deteriorating health or question the choices that resulted in his seclusion and excessive medicine. The public's picture of Elvis was shaped in large part by misunderstandings, particularly in the latter years of his life. The media changed him from a well-known person to someone whose dazzling career was waning as he fell ill and developed a drug addiction. Nobody truly knew how much life had affected his health. This appeared to be less about careful, hard reality and compassion, and more about the scandal and spectacle. Elvis does in fact live on in memory, despite the fact that it is a tragedy that could obscure any of the previous few years. There are efforts to discover more about the man than the myth, and his fans continue to be the most devoted. We will gain a more comprehensive understanding of Elvis's true self by analyzing the ambiguities and misguided allegiances that shaped his life. We will also gain a great deal of insight into the challenges experienced by people who live their lives under the constant scrutiny of celebrity. The quest to fully comprehend Elvis despite the myth and media spotlight hasn't stopped even after several decades, and new information has only increased the fascination. Recent disclosures. The mystery surrounding Elvis Presley's death has gained greater depth in recent years due to new revelations. Ginger Alden, Elvis's then-girlfriend, provided one of the most important first-hand recollections when she found him unconscious on the Graceland bathroom floor. She claimed that Elvis had probably passed out while attempting to use the restroom, which confirmed long-held theories about how his chronic constipation and other health issues might have contributed to his demise. Beyond Alden's story, medical professionals have examined the initial autopsy results more closely. A strong theory was presented by Dr. Forrest Tennant, a doctor who subsequently examined the findings. He proposed that an inflammatory disease might have been brought on by a severe head injury Elvis received in 1967. It ultimately resulted in a series of health issues. These might have included the gastrointestinal problems that Elvis had for years, as well as persistent discomfort and inflammation. These fresh disclosures cast doubt on the notion that Elvis's death was due only to substance abuse and bad lifestyle decisions. Rather, these results show how a combination of untreated medical issues, wounds, and possibly even some poor handling by people around him contributed to his death. Most people were unaware of how complicated and human Elvis's dying was. Please leave a remark and give us a thumbs up if this altered your perception of the monarch. Could he have been rescued, in your opinion? Remember to press the bell and subscribe so you don't miss any of the stories that history has attempted to conceal. Are you up for more? Go to the next video. We discovered something you won't believe.